Have you ever met someone that knew the answer to a question before you asked the question? Or knew things about your life before you started talking to them? Well, I got an opportunity to speak to Oliver Dolby, and he's able to do things just like that, and they call him the Soul Doctor. Here we go. Do you have esoteric sensibilities and things like that?
First thing I would say is I probably know before I feel, and then I see before I hear. So it sort of goes in order. Knowingness first, feeling and seeing second, and then everything else after that, third, fourth, fifth.
So you see in colors?
I see in colors.
I can tell.
Okay, fair enough.
The only thing I understand, I think sensibilities, a lot of these spiritual healers out here, I think need foundation. And, it's a very, very interesting space. And I think there's a lot of egos in the space. And,
Literally.
I've been in comedy for 10 years, been in live entertainment for over 10 years, did a lot of stuff prior to that as well. So it's like I'm coming into this space. I've had these abilities come to the surface in the past 5 years. When you say knowing, it's like if I speak to somebody, stuff will just pop in my head and I'll know what it is. And going back to the sensory part is, I don't think everybody has the same gifts. I think there's a process, and maybe this is something we can enlighten, and maybe we can figure out some new stuff on this podcast. But I think that there's a process, and then I think there's a focus sensory. If you can make people understand focus sensory, I think that's how you build somewhat of a foundation, and then align that focus sensory with how to reset humanity, if you will.
The way I look at it, I think, is that we all have these abilities, whether we choose to use them or not. Mm-hmm. But there'll always be one which will be the path of flow, easiest direction. So for me, that was knowingness. I could look at someone and know straight away what color their aura was. And then back in the old days, I used to doubt myself and have to question it and go, why did I just say that? When I was in my early 20s, a psychic lady said, oh, you've got some healing abilities, you need to use them more. And she looked across the room and said, what's wrong with that gentleman over there? And I just said, he's got a bad knee. And I had no idea why I even said those words. Mm-hmm. And then speaking to him afterwards, he said, by the way, you mentioned I've got a bad knee. I actually have got a bad knee. I'm going to go for surgery in a few days' time. So we never know how it's going to happen, but it'll always flow through the path of least resistance. So knowingness for me was easy. I just knew.
Yeah.
So then I double checked by looking and seeing, okay, why am I saying that the aura is blue? And then I start to see the blue. Mm-hmm. And I think all the other gifts or senses need to be worked on to really develop them. But you'll always default to the one which is natural to you.
So you understand that.
Not many other people do, unfortunately. When you tell people, I know that this is wrong with you, they go, how, why, what's the scientific explanation? So that's why I don't really tell people that I know before I see. Mm-hmm. I tell them I see because they understand the visual aspect. Whereas we cannot talk about the knowingness because it's natural for us.
Well, why do you think so many spiritual advisors and spiritual guides, they have these gifts, but their frequency is somewhat lower than the gifts they're presenting? What do you think about that?
I agree 100% with you. I think there's a lot of people who are in the spiritual field that have not really worked on themselves. I've got a very simple analogy is if you're swimming in the mud pool, you're in the pigsty swimming around, your intuition is going to tell you to do, you're going to do because you're in the mud. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Now, when you start to work on yourself, deal with your traumas, your fears, your beliefs, your mind states, start to work with this meditation, whether it doesn't matter what it is you're doing, but you start to get yourself out of that mud pit and you start to clean yourself off a little bit and you start to see other options available to you. Now, a lot of people go through this healing, get themselves out of the mud, but don't take it any further. And you've got to keep working on yourself. So if I understand myself as someone who's out of the mud and now on the pavement, that's great. Because I can help anybody who's still stuck in the mud or in the gutter, but I can't necessarily help people who are in the building on the first floor, the second floor, the third floor. And so when a spiritual healer hasn't worked on themselves, hasn't climbed that ladder, hasn't gotten to the building, hasn't moved from first, second, third, fourth floor, they're always going to see things from a different, lower perspective versus the person who's on, say, the 10th floor. So that's the sort of way I sort of look at it. And I also know that from just what I've seen, as someone goes through a healing crisis and heals a certain part, they get a small glimpse of the truth. And so I struggle to find an analogy that would work really well for me to explain to my clients about different types of healers, how they're all good, but sometimes they're stuck. And it's almost like you're on a beach and you pick up a grain of sand And now you suddenly had this healing from this grain of sand. And you suddenly know that you have something magical. And you want to go and share that grain of sand with the rest of the world, which is a great thing to do. And clients will come along to these spiritual healers, self-proclaimed gurus, whatever they call themselves, and go, I have the beach. And they'll sell the beach to the people. And because you're naturally in tune with something, you know part of what they're saying is true because your energy, your soul, your spirit recognizes that grain of sand as part of a beach. And so you go and present, fall in line with this person, get healing from them, go to their workshops, develop with them. But it's always going to fall flat because you haven't got the whole beach. You've only got the grain of sand. So that's the sort of analogy that I sort of see that as. And of course, the more you work on yourself, the more you look at your own healing, your own beliefs, your own traumas, the own stories that you're telling yourself every day, the more you can grow and expand and gain more access to that beach.
It's funny you say that, but I think that's Mind Valley. I think that's Mind Valley because I always, when I see these people from Mind Valley on stage or whatever, I know Joe Dispenza's got a great career or whatever, but I think they operate in a very emotional, unfoundational space, and they're just feeding off the emotions of the crowd because that's acting, that's drama, and we live in an emotional decision space is what I see. And like I said,
we're all addicted to drama, aren't we? I mean, Everybody's addicted to drama. We just can't help it. We're drawn to it. It's almost like we've been trained. I think that goes back to the survival mind state, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. To survive, we need drama. We've got to keep looking out for that monster that's going to come and get us. But you're so right, because I think these presenters are good at a certain level and they tend to work in that sort of emotional bandwidth, but can't take it any higher than that emotional bandwidth, which is the drama, the stress, and people need to get through that stage, obviously. But then what comes after that?
Well, you're not, if you're feeding off emotions of other people, you're not really teaching them anything to enrich themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like you're a doctor or something from Andromeda and you're involved in creation by color because creation is color and somewhat of a directive of creation through color.
It's interesting because I always see creation as dark, as the void, as blackness. And then we bring our own spark of color, our own spark of imagination, and bring those colors together to form the creation in whatever form that might be.
Andromeda is pretty dark from the foundation.
Absolutely. You know, I heard a very good analogy of it is that you're driving down the highway, the motorway, whatever it is, and there's a car crash ahead on the other side of the road, and everybody stops, slows down to have a look at what's happening. Even yourself will go like, I'm not going to look, I'm just going to keep driving. But you do find yourself slowing down, even though you might not necessarily look. At the same time, how many people stop to see the beauty in the world? How many people slow down to see the sunset on the other side of the road? They just don't. They just don't see it. And I think it's built into us, isn't it? It's that sort of survival mode. So we've got to be aware of what's happening, but we don't, because that's the old way of looking at things.
I think it depends on your non-conscious. You know, I think your non-conscious has an innate direction and your sensibilities are the steering wheel. And wherever you go with those sensibilities and what you accept or don't accept is the direction you may take that non-conscious that may not want to go that direction. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, true. Yes.
And I think the non-conscious tries to correct itself. It's almost like a program. The non-conscious tries to correct itself, but based on the heaviness or whatever is attached to that person, they may never get there.
But also a way of looking at it is they're stuck in that loop and they need something to break that cycle, that loop that they're stuck in. That takes awareness, because if you don't know you're doing it, you're not going to change it.
Was that close to where your soul is from? Because I don't know. I see that in your eyes. I just know that I think you're very, very old, very, very old person. And that's just what my sense is. And the reason I say that is, I've been told I'm John the Baptist.
And I wouldn't disagree with that. But you know, I'm not gonna lay my life on the line saying it is true. But you know what I'm saying is that we have this sort of, you know, when you look at someone's eyes, you can tell so much about them, right? So when you can see someone's eyes, you can see that sparkle in their eyes. You can see the soul. That's why they say the eyes are the window to the soul. You can see straight away whether that spark is there or whether that's been clouded over. Have we been around for a lot longer than we think we have? Absolutely. You know, my belief is that we're infinite beings who've never been born and therefore never can die. We're just having this earthly experience, learning about, in my view, a full-on creator God of our own universe, of our own world, of our own beingness. And when you look at it like that, you suddenly realize that it's okay. Everything that's happening in my life is happening because I planned it in some way in advance. And it might not always work out exactly how you plan. Most plans don't work. Most plans change. But we're constantly growing, constantly changing. So let's constantly move in the right direction. Let's constantly go towards health and healing and knowingness. I think my greatest lesson over the sort of 30-odd years that I've been doing this work is learning to know myself. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very selfish with my energy. I work on myself far more than I work on anybody else because I want me, Oliver, to be better today than he was yesterday, even if it is a tiny, small little amount. And if people can start to look at the world and go, hey, if I change me, then the world around me changes.
Isn't that a pillar of spirituality? Finding thyself?
Absolutely.
Or the pillar. That's the pillar that nobody seems to get.
But if you talk to people about pillars, they switch off, unless, of course, they're architects. John, the one thing you've got to know is the pillar, the middle pillar is the strongest one. Forget about the left and right ones. You need to be the middle part, down the middle pillar, and you need to do that. And you've switched off and you go, oh, well, what's he on about? No, I don't care. But teach people in language that everyone can understand. We've all experienced trauma, just like we've all stepped in a dog mess on a pavement or in a park. Now, once you've cleaned your shoe, you don't go rushing back and going, where's the next pile of dog mess that I can jump into? You're hyper awake, scanning where you're walking for anything that might look or resemble that dog mess. But with our traumas, we jump from one trauma to the next because it's almost like we haven't realized that we've messed up our shoes. When you tell people and explain to people that, hey, you've just spent 20 minutes cleaning your shoe, you just spent an hour, a day, a month, a year dealing with your trauma. You've lived that trauma. You experienced everything it has to teach you. So why are you going to jump back into it again?
Well, this is what I talk about foundation, so if we teach people about their foundation, and I have a answer for that of why people will have trauma, they'll get out of that trauma, and then they will jump back into that. So if you understand the laws of attraction, which is unbalanced, and the reaction, we define law of attraction based on the reaction to the environment, foundation, and sensibilities. If you're taught about the non-conscious and you understand tone, and you understand tone attracts tone, if you have this tone or this feeling of this tone, you're going to be attracted to the same tone you just got out of, but we're not educating the people the right way to understand that so they don't go back to that tone. It's an innate thing because they still have to close the wound, if you will.
That the foundation is so important, right? And if you look at everything that's happened to you in your life, every bit of it has been important. Every bit of it's been a particular tone. But if I suddenly take out all the negative tones, you're going to fall over because you're going to be half the person you actually are. So we need to still have all those bits in our foundation because they actually make you who you are. We've all learnt from the good. We've also all learnt and experienced the bad and every single shade of gray or white in between. So if we take all those experiences and allow them to be, but not be emotionally attached to them. You drive a car. When you get in the car, you don't think about gas, brake, left, right, indicating. You do it automatically. And I think we've got to break that automatic cycle in people because they're so in the automatic, they don't even realize they're doing it. And the only way you can break that automatic cycle is by showing awareness, saying, have you thought about it? Have you seen? Have you looked at it from a different angle? Have you changed your viewpoint of that? Have you worked on yourself enough to climb out of the mud pit to stand on the pavement?
When you think about that, I know that these are pieces that we need because we don't understand alignment. And I think these pieces get involved to correct the alignment. So if you don't understand that, but if you align humanity the right way, you're going to eliminate the bad customer, and you're not going to have those pieces that we have to have today to fix the alignment, if you will. Right?
I think it's to show that reflection, isn't it? To show the opposite.
Yeah. So if you understand our non-conscious, you understand our non-conscious, you understand our birth date, right? We have a direction for success, for relationships. We have all this predetermined. So just by understanding our environment and our non-conscious foundation, we can align ourselves correctly. We won't marry the wrong person. We marry the right person because we're aligned our relationship. We have success because we're looking that direction for our success. We have great health because we're looking that direction for great health. And this is where it comes out of me is like that alignment and understanding that starting from the beginning, right? You're going to eliminate the bad customer. You're going to have less trauma, right? And you're going to have less fixing issues through life. So I think because of the imbalance, these things are trying to correct itself and humanity doesn't understand it.
I think humanity has got addicted to the distraction, and it's very easy to allow yourself to be distracted by everything else. The FOMO of life, what other people are doing, that complete comparison all the time to what other people are doing, achieving, and you're not. And so that naturally makes someone who's not feel bad. And when they feel bad, they feel depressed. And when they feel depressed, they don't want to do anything. And then that snowballs into the wrong choices, the unhealthy choices, should we say. So there needs to be stronger role models in the world, really, to help people realign. We often, our role models, and I don't want to call them heroes because that's also wrong. It's been sort of, that word's almost been polluted. They are not the most genuine people on the planet. They're often very, very toxic.
That's where, when you think about that the role models that we present in an emotional society are the least spiritual ones in the world.
Yeah. And you have to ask yourself, how do we get it so wrong?
Yeah, right? That's crazy.
Because we really have.
Yeah. That's
I would love to take an opportunity to work with any one of the politicians out there and just to clear them of the gremlins that are living in their aura, in their space, in their field, and they all have so many entities that are just trolling them, using them.
Now, have you ever had your Akashics records read?
I haven't actually.
You haven't?
No, not by anybody I would say is a proper reader, should we say. Put it that way.
And you said energy, you hold your energy and you work on yourself. What energy abilities do you have?
Okay, so I was not born gifted. And many people think that, oh, yes, you're just one of the lucky ones. You woke up one day and you started to see everything. Wasn't like that at all. My background is a rock climbing instructor. That's my background, living on the mountains in the rocks. Very long story short is one of my clients said I should go and see a particular doctor. It turned out to be a chiropractor. And I went along, and I'd been asthmatic my whole life. And at the age of 21, he did a bit of hands-on healing on me, adjusted my spine, and sent me out the door with a little bag of homeopathics. A week later, I realized I hadn't used my inhaler. A month later, I realized, why am I taking all these drugs? I'm going to stop them. And that was when I realized that there was this thing called energy and this thing called healing that didn't go via the allopathic, by the GP route. And it might be better for me than to follow the medical way. That was my introduction. I didn't feel energy. I didn't sense energy. I didn't see energy. I probably didn't know to a certain degree, but didn't trust myself enough to know it. And it's through that introduction that I've now managed to go so far and make a huge amount of mistakes along the way, by the way. It hasn't all been rosy. It's been some very dark times, very amazing times, working with different teachers, different self-proclaimed gurus. In fact, sometimes some of them leading me completely off the path or my path and having to fight to get my way back again. And so the journey through this is work. But what's changed in the last, I would say, 5 years is the speed at which change is possible. And I think we can all see that now with what's happening in technology and AI and the speed at which things are happening. So with that speed, if we can change the world around us with speed, why can't we change ourselves with speed? And so one of my missions is to take everything I know and make it faster, be able to do healing work and spiritual growth and expansion, understanding at a much faster rate, because we're out of that old time. We don't need months to heal our trauma. We can heal our trauma in seconds. We can heal it instantaneously if we believe it possible.
Interesting. And I think you're very foundational because I can feel that you're very grounded. That's why I say I think you're from a drama or, because
that drama, probably right. Yes.
That's where I've been told I was from. I don't know. I think there's a foundational presence with that. And then based on how your eyes look. But when you think about the speed, there's a lot of, I'll give you an example of Reiki, right? And this is no disrespect to any Reiki master out there, whoever. But when I went to a Reiki master, I got my practitioner's license immediately. I never practiced. right? Then I realized I was told that my energy comes from source. So if you think about Reiki and you think about symbols and you think about all the fractional information that has been put in the universe, some of these things are somewhat misleading because why, if people understood creation, because I say there's two mindsets in the world. There's a discovery mindset, then there's a creation mindset. And 99% of the people in the world have a discovery mindset, and it's going to take you longer to figure out the answer. And I think through that discovery, that's where all these symbols and all this other bullshit, fractional information was created almost as a decoy in a way, instead of understanding creation from source and getting to these answers quicker. What do you think about
I don't think it's a
concept?
I like what you're saying there, but I don't think it's a decoy. I think it's a tool that's necessary to help people get there. Right? Just like you can ride a bicycle, you learn to ride a bicycle fairly quickly, a simple thing to do. But if you've got stabilizers on the bicycle, you'll learn much quicker because you won't do as much time falling over. Then at a certain time, you're going to take that tool off. You're going to take those stabilizers off. You're going to not need the Reiki symbols and able to go straight to source and get that energy. We reframe it as tools that are necessary to help people that don't know get to where they need to get to.
Well, reverse engineer that. What I'm saying is reverse engineer that thought process. If you are going through a process of discovery, right, and you get fixated over here on this little piece, and then it evolves into something that you think you need to get that information, then it becomes a doctrine, then it becomes a symbol, then it becomes the gospel. But if you understand, if you understand the alignment, you understand the direction, all that stuff is going to be eliminated. It's just like eliminating the bad customer. I think the East put out a lot of narratives that were wrong. And I'm trying to figure out why. Because I had this thing about creation coming through, that God created everything by fours. And there's 4 quadrants on Earth. And each quadrant, and I think Atlantic Ocean is the middle of Earth, and each quadrant represents the pineal gland, or each river that fed Atlantis would represent the pineal gland of that quadrant, because creation is linear. I think if you can wrap your head around that structure, right, and you're coming from where you understand this human came from, there's no symbols needed. The only thing that's needed is to understand your tone, right, and what group you're attracted to. That's my thought. I'm pretty deep. I wrote a book and used social media to demonstrate the quantum field, right? It's just like when you say symbols, it's almost just like through this discovery, we've created a realm of physics that is completely fake. So how many symbols are within that realm of fake physics that maybe that's what it is. When I think about that, if you create a realm of physics, maybe the symbols within that realm are trying to pull you back to the quantum field. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe there's something like that. Maybe there is something, you're right there, where it's a redirection. Like, hey, you're in the wrong spot. We need to drag you over here. But if you understood the creation, you won't have to worry about that bullshit.
Think about it another way. It's almost like it's like a hack. It's like trying to hack something, isn't it? You're trying to hack the universe, trying to hack source and go, can we get there by using this particular symbol?
Yeah.
And yes, it'll work to a degree that it will, but it won't. For instance, we take candles, for instance. When a candle is charged with the right energy, that candle light goes up into the ethers, into the heavens, into the universe, whatever you want to say, and starts to create whatever it was charged with. And that's why we have in churches and synagogues and mosques and temples and stuff, all candles, the power of candles. Because it was a hack to hack the system, to get that information that they wanted, or get that manifestation that they wanted, that health, that prayer, that whatever the intention was, down in the physical without necessarily having the knowledge or the understanding of themselves. And it's when you actually know yourself from that higher perspectives, because I don't think we would ever quite get to the highest perspective, then we're able to not hack the system. We don't need to hack the system. We have access to it all. We have the codes. We have it all. So yeah, 100% agree with you. Once we get the human consciousness to not be reliant on the hack and not be stuck where they are, things will change rapidly. And they are changing rapidly. So we are getting there. Although sometimes it seems a lot slower than I think you and I would want.
I get very frustrated, and I never knew why until recently. I don't talk unless I'm teaching somebody something or I'm receiving information that I can learn from. Are you the same way?
100%. It's so nice just to be able to sit and watch the world and go, and not comment, not say anything, just watch and observe, because you don't need to be part of the conversation. The conversation is often the distraction. It takes you away from where you are. And you look at all the sort of, I guess, more the Indian type gurus and masters and teachers, how they're always quiet. They know that their thoughts and words have power and can create chaos.
Yeah.
Because the more you know yourself, the more power you have in your words and in your thoughts. So that's why, as we become more in tune with our powers in our spirituality, our growth, our expansion, our light, our source, whatever you want to call it, we find that we almost naturally just quieten that mind and quieten that mouth and listen and observe.
Now, I was reading on your website about being called the soul doctor. Now, I think you're very foundational. I think you're very, very, very knowledgeable, and you have a lot of information, more information. How do you put in the real world? You said you've been supporting yourself through this, doing this, helping people as a soul doctor. Tell me that process, of if someone wants to come and see you, what happens? How do you work with someone?
So very simply, I'm not one of these long-term therapists that people go and see once a week for the rest of their life. I do 4 sessions with someone, and I work very, very quickly going in there and clearing the energy that they're carrying, the trauma, the bugs, the energy attachments, the cloud of darkness that often surrounds people or surrounds so many people. Then we start to look at the soul and the heart. I think the soul and the heart are connected very closely. And so you've got to heal the heart before you can heal the soul. As a soul, if you've broken heart, you're really struggling. And most people, by the way, have a broken heart, have trauma in the heart. It happens to all of us, from a very, very young age, when you're left alone at nursery or you don't get fed in time. And then there's teenage years, of course, heart breaks a lot and still does. But when you get all those things working together, you're able then to look at the beliefs, some of the ancestral karma that's coming through. There's often a lot of that through certain families. And then it's about changing the story. What does that person tell themselves on a day-to-day basis that is keeping them stuck? And from that's sort of my foundation is the 4 sessions with me, really taking people as far as they want to go with the main goal of making them better tomorrow than they were today. Always about empowering. Can they be better? Can they stand? Can they speak their truth? Can they stand up for themselves? Can they let go of the old way of looking for the answers outside of yourself? The true answers are actually inside. And now I do a lot more teaching as well now. So I teach people, in particular, I teach healers or those in the service industry become better at what they do. Using some ancient techniques, creating spaces, clearing energy, protecting the energy field, so that those healers can be better healers. Because the world needs healers. There's 8 billion people, and you and I are not going to see all 8 billion people. We need people out there on the ground to realize that they're out of the mud, on the pavement, they've got to keep working on themselves so they can heal more and do more. And so that's where I've got a strong focus on now, is doing more of the group stuff and less of the one-on-one individual stuff, although I enjoy both.
Well, I can understand that, because I think your message needs to be heard by the masses, because the information that you have, if you saw everybody one-on-one, you're just limiting the information is what I think.
I've realized that now. Yes. It took me a long time to come to this level of understanding, and also the understanding that I've got to be this introvert that is, as they say, an extrovert in certain social situations.
Yeah.
Which I'm definitely more the introvert. I'm quite happy to sit quietly and watch and observe.
Get bored easily?
I do, but I'm never bored because I'm always busy.
Yeah, I get bored easily myself. I mean, if you tried to read me, can you read me? What do you pick up from me?
Firstly, there's real brightness about you, which is hard to explain. Sort of, firstly, you touched on the area of old soul. Well, that's obvious, okay? But then there's this sort of brightness that burns through you, almost like it's like this contagious curiosity that you have that's burning bright through you. So it's like this flame of curiosity. And that for me is very, very obvious. And by the way, I don't see the aura and energy from the way the aura photograph might at the holistic show or fair or, conference, whatever. I see it through what I feel and see rather than what's expected. Okay, I'm going to tell you like it is, right? I don't know if you ever worked with snakes before, but there is a snake that's up around the back of your head, just looking out. Very clear.
Really?
And this is wisdom. Wisdom. Yeah, wisdom. The snake holds a lot of wisdom.
Interesting. I drew a photo when I was 5 years old, and it was me standing in front of this serpent, like a snake-looking thing, and I had this hammer on my back, and the snake's here, and there's a tree right behind me. What do you think that represents?
Well, tree, straight away, it's life force, tree of life, your growth pattern. A lot of people have a lot of tools on their back. If you ask me where all my magical tools are, they're all on my back. Every single one of them. Swords, hammers, mirrors, everything you could think of is there. The snake, often we see the snake as a demon, but it's not. There's a lot of wisdom. Think of the snake as that vibration. That vibration. Snakes hear through vibration. They hear through the footsteps you make on the ground. That's their hearing. So yes, snake, very, very powerful. But remember, what I see into it and what you know about it is two different things. I will see what I see, but you will know what you know about that drawing, about that image.
So no, you see any colors? You just see a brightness? Because I was told the other thing I was told recently is about I was the guardian of these crystal skulls.
Okay. Now, remember, I'm not a psychic, so I'm not going to read psychically.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And for me, that means tapping into an aspect of myself that I don't really turn on very often.
Gotcha.
Okay, for me, it's about seeing, knowingness, and also keeping it simple.
Gotcha.
I don't want to use metaphysical terms, talk about chakras or things like that. Even though people know about them, I tend to avoid that. So I will tend to talk about what I see. First thing that comes up, your aura is clean, right? And that is very rare. It's very rare for me to find someone whose aura is clean.
Gotcha.
There's no darkness. There's no little creepy crawlies running around. And if they are there, they're hiding. Okay. So they're not there, which is brilliant. Okay. That's the first thing I do. That's like a default for me. Yeah. Turn on. Oh, I see that. Right. Boom. Yeah. But then it was very prominent was suddenly the snake came up from behind you. It's like, whoa, okay. Very, very interesting. And by the way, snakes work with us all the time. That wisdom, the Ouroboros, the closing of the circle, the snake eating its tail. It's that completion of the circle, bringing all that around. So there's a lot of wisdom there that can be roped into it. And then, of course, I talked about the flame that was burning through. That's almost like it's actually from just below the heart, burning right up through the body, up through the skull. And again, that's the mind, the fire in the mind, the curiosity, the wanting to know, the wanting to expand, but also at the same time as bringing it up. You got to remember the fire's got to die down so you can bring that energy back into the heart. Okay, so bring it up and down, bring it up and down, and then use the heart to get that knowingness, right? Because when we know a lot intellectually, we don't actually know it. We only know it intellectually. We haven't actually lived it. And it's when you live it, when you bring it to the heart, when you know it inside your heart, that's when you know.
Interesting.
And often that knowingness can't be turned into words. And I think that's why knowing you've got it here, but bring it down, and then you'll really know it.
Gotcha. It's funny you say the fire thing. That's the fire. Something about the fire was going to be very prevalent in the next 6 months for me for some reason. So it's very interesting that you say that.
Okay. And fire is about passion as well. We've got to have fire. We can't not have fire. The elements in our body, they're very, very important. And if you don't have that passion, you don't have that drive, you don't have that, well, you wouldn't do anything. You stay in bed all day. We've got to have fire. And I'm a firm believer that you've got to use fire when you're just not feeling it. Just use a fire, get that spark back. A lot of people are spending a lot of time praying, but these are the silent prayers that they're making. And you realize that most people's thoughts have no power. You've got to speak what you want. If you don't ask, you're not going to get. If you don't actually open your mouth, make the word, then you're not going to get it. And I always have this sort of idea that the brain creates what the sentence wants to go. Then you take that sentence down your body, down to the hara, the sacral chakra, that intention point in the body. Then you bring it back up past the heart and fill your love into that sentence, and then manifest it by using your throat, your mouth, your voice, your air, your life force. So we're taking information, bringing it around the body, back up and out the mouth, and making a creation by bringing all those elements into it. The intention, the heart, the life force, the air, the breath, and then speak it into the universe, speak into the world.
Interesting.
And if you speak like that with that intention, boom, things can happen very, very quickly.
Very simple information, very foundational information. And that's definitely, I haven't spoke to anybody that kind of has this type of angle. Now, you said that you are from the mountains and rock climbing. Now, was your family in this area? Is this where you were born? And has your family had any special abilities? Anybody in the family that had something going on?
The only one would be my grandmother. and she shut it down. She didn't like seeing death. I think she saw a lot of death. She used to sort of read palms and pick the horses for the upcoming races and all those sort of, and really know that. And she was one of the people that told my mother that I'd be a doctor. And they all laughed at me because my school grades were never going to be a doctor in any sort of medical study way. And it was only once she'd gone that I was named the soul doctor, and that's where that came through. But she was the only one that I've ever met in my family that's had any sort of ability. I think my mother did to a certain degree, but she didn't want to use it and made sure it didn't happen. She sort of shut it down completely. But the rest of us, I've got 3 brothers. They're just normal blokes, having a good life, doing their stuff. The mountains was my safe space as a child. I could go to the mountains, be alone, grounded, connected to nature, find myself, face my fears on a rope. At the end of a rope, it can be very scary, that perceived risk. And yeah, I had my journey out there. It was a time in my life when that was more important than it is now. I still enjoy the mountains, but I don't get to go as much as I would like to.
And what part of the world was this in?
That was in Cape Town, South Africa. So Table Mountain was my playground. We were up there as brothers, we were up there all the time. My grandfather built the original cable station, the cable car that runs up and down the mountain. He built the original one. He was an engineer on his way from Norway on his way to Australia. The boat stopped in Cape Town. He got off, liked it, never turned back again. So that's sort of my sort of Norwegian side on my mother's side.
Scandinavian. That's where your esoteric abilities come from.
I work a lot with some of the Odin, Freya, some of those gods and goddesses. Very interesting that comes through.
I think those are the people, we call them Scandinavians, but I think those are the indigenous people from Atlantis, the aftermath of Atlantis. Because when I get around people like you, and it's like I know that energy, I have scalar energy coming out of my hands, right? It's heavily out of my right hand.
Yeah, more than right than left, yes.
Yeah. So when I'm around somebody that has that connection, the energy starts coming out of my hands. I can feel it. Like it's almost like a radar.
That's a useful way of using it. I think it's brilliant. You have this sort of skill that you can just get the right feel from it straight away.
Yeah, like if I walk up to somebody that has something and it can be stronger than others. I've met 1 or 2 people where I could touch their back and they say it felt euphoric, right? Just by touch.
And I think, that's the world we're coming to, where we're going to meet people, bump into people, see people, interact with people that we both need something from. We often hear this idea that the person's reflecting something at you. Well, no, not always. Maybe you're just there to reflect something at them. Maybe they're just to touch their shoulder, shake their hand, give them a hug, and then move on. Who knows? We like to complicate things, and I'm very much against, I could have 20 steps in every healing that I do, but why complicate it? Keep it simple. Simple doesn't necessarily mean that it's not deep, because there's layers to everything. There's many, many layers to things that we know as spirits, but we don't necessarily know as the Windows 95 that we're operating with in our human brain. Right? It's not the supercomputer. So we try often to try and understand and make things very complex with this brain that's not designed to do that. It's not designed to understand the universe. Parts of it, yes. And at certain parts you understand more as we grow and expand, but you don't have to know why. But you can also still layer the magic into it. You bring the layers of energy into it. So it's constantly about layering, constantly about growing, constantly about expanding, constantly about thinking outside of what you've been told is possible, to break down that walls of safety or knowingness that we are indoctrinated through our schooling systems, that life has to be a certain way. To break through that and go, what else is possible? How can we make this faster, easier, simpler? And of course, the more people that do it, the more you notice how more it amps up. But the first person to, I suppose, kite surf, it was quite a lesson to do. But now, because so many people are doing it, you get on a board, grab a sail, and off you go. It's fairly straightforward if people have the desire to do that. I don't know why I chose kite surfing.
Well, I want to ask you two more questions before we get off here. And if we want to find you and people want to talk to you or look to hire you or bring you to speak somewhere, how do we find Oliver?
It's very simple. It's oliver@oliverdolby.com. That's been my email address, oliverdolby.com. And that's also my website, oliverdolby.com. So very simple. That's the way. I'm also on most of the social channels as a Soul Doctor Official. So Soul Doctor Official on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, where else? LinkedIn. They're all there. They're all there.
Now, being from South Africa, I just recently went to Bermuda and did some grid work there.
Very good.
And went to the NASA facility on the end of Cooper Island. And it was very interesting, to say the least. And I actually saw a face in one of the rocks there. And the other place that I grounded was Chimney Rock. The third place, because I think that this is the realization that each system has three binders. Planetary system, the universe, there's always three binders that connect everything. And I think that Chimney Rock, Bermuda, and Trail Ridge, Florida, are the binders for the grid system and the focus of the center of where all the energy and crystals are.
Interesting you say that, because one of the missions I know about that I have to do is to help with the grid system.
Really?
It's interesting you bring that up. And it's something that I've had to do on the back burner for a while now, waiting for the right moment.
Well, I think I've known you before.
Yes. When I first saw your picture on your website, I was like, I know this. I know you. I've heard you. I've seen you. I've been,
Yeah. I think I've heard you before. And it's like how I felt when I went to this area, and I bring the light energy through my body, and then it would go through my feet. It was pretty wild. So, and then after I did that, everywhere I would ride around the island, and I would go into these pockets, and I would feel euphoria here or euphoria there. This euphoria energy. I started feeling these euphoria pockets, which is very, very interesting. And, that's the grid part. Now, the four corners, you being in Africa.
Well, I'm in London, UK at the moment.
Well,
but
from Africa originally.
Yes.
Yeah, but Atlas Mountains, never been talked about, never been discussed. But if you look at the Atlas Mountains, they align with the Blue Ridge Mountains across the water. And then the other two places would be the highest point in Greenland and the highest point in Antarctica, which is very, very interesting. Did you ever have any thoughts about the Atlas Mountains of being one of the four corners of the world?
I never put it together, but now that you say it, talking about those 4 points, it's all coming through that, yes, that is true. You're speaking truth. And now my curiosity is interested, and I'm going to go and look further, see what else there is out there. Go and have a look at a map and just see how they do align.
Well, if you think about the four corners of Earth, and creation was 4.6 billion years ago, and the Atlantic Ocean is the center, and how the structure is with the four corners, it's very uniform. This could be the breeding ground for each civilization through time. And I've told there's 53 ancient civilizations that have been created. And I'm just wondering if they use this same process. I mean, it's hard for us to fathom that, because I don't think, I think we're very short-sighted. And I think these very emotional driven people who are trying to figure out all these answers, we're going to Egypt. Egypt is only one of 16 locations on Earth that is a spiritual location, because it's all foundational, right? And it's all, when I say foundational, this is where science tells on itself. If you look at the beginning of creation, and you look at the most developed areas at the beginning of creation, which is foundational, Precambrian era, 4.6 billion years ago. Each of the four quadrants has four locations that are highly spiritual because they're the oldest. So if you look through time, that's why the indigenous people lived in these areas, because they're the oldest areas. When you start to program the geographics around the world and program structures and things like this, the middle of Earth, Atlantic Ocean, could be the breeding ground for all these ancient civilizations, and whatever fell out at each creation could have been these fractional narratives. Piss people off here, maybe they didn't get enough of this, enough of that, because everybody's trying to figure out all these other fractional pieces of information and trying to figure out divine creation, and they can't.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% right there, because it is all about those fractions that are trying to figure out the piece.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why we always look at the humans. Well, I always see the world as the humans are all the puzzle pieces, and we've all got our own place to play in the greater scheme of creation. We've just got to realize that we're a puzzle piece. We don't know it all. We can when we start connecting with other people. When I connect to you, you connect to others, we start to grow that sort of like-minded, almost community. Then those puzzle pieces start to come together. And that's when it starts to make more sense. It's impossible to see the greater picture when you're all alone.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say it's impossible, but it's much harder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in our histories, we've had those spiritual teachers that have been able to go up and look at that different perspective and see down and see more of the puzzle pieces together to create that image of that way, that vision, that path, that journey that would help others.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So yeah, I loved the 4 corners. I'm definitely going to have a look at the 4 points. I had no idea that there was the mirrors there. One of my goals is to get to Greenland. Haven't got there yet, but I'm sure I will.
Well, and I'll end this, here's another scientific thing that makes sense. Just like in Chimney Rock, I would be interested in the Atlas Mountains. Look and see if there's a bottomless pools in the Atlas Mountains, because where the granite monolith is in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Lake Lure, North Carolina, there's a bottomless pool right around the corner, and they've never found the bottom of that. So if you read in the Bible, that's where God would put all the demons and so forth. But scientifically, the structure of that is in that area to suck out all the negative energy around that location. So if you run into a bottomless pool near the Atlas Mountains, you'll know what that's for. So speaking of understanding the center of the earth, if everything is aligned perfectly, and you go to Bermuda, all tides and currents somewhat in there, right? And they have a little bit of a current, they have a little bit of a tide, but the only reason they have that is because of the unbalance, right? So scientifically, that makes sense that everything ends.
Everything's coming to that center point, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that kind of backs up. So like when I have these thought processes, I'm not going to put out this information unless I can rationalize that for you and use science against itself to answer the question. And then I give people nowhere to go.
Yes. The more we open ourselves out, the more we start to break down those fixed beliefs that we've been trained to believe, the more we can start to see those puzzle pieces, start to bring it all together, start to see the science behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. Well, if you're out there, and I think Mr. Oliver Dolby is very foundational, he's very informational. I think me and him are on the same page. And, I think these are the types of people that we need to put out in the world to teach as many people as possible what's going on. So this has been the great Oliver Dolby. I'm John Edmonds Kozma, CEO of Bang Productions, owner of the TikTok Live Creator Network Agency, and host of the Unimpressed Podcast. Until next time.